Hello again, Air Raider Robbies. Welcome to my last video for meta, the new meta for EDF 5. We're going to be doing Air Raider this time. He has quite a few options like before, so let's get started here. First, let's talk about the old meta in the past, EDF 4. The old meta for Air Raider was typically Strafe Plan, was one of his best air raids, mainly because the drop ships that would drop the Strafe Plan would actually the enemies would follow those ships and kind of push the enemies away from you. So that was very, very useful, and they were very strong at that time. Of course, the turrets were good. Zexar guns, Zex launchers. Once in a while, cannon like Cannon D, Cannon C would be good for targets that didn't move, like large targets. Of course, you would take a lot of bunkers for Air Raider. Balam was good. Railguns were one of his best vehicles, very strong sniping capabilities, and it penetrated through targets. Proteus was of course good if you could just station in one spot and stay in one area. And Nagling was very strong in EDF 4. You would get it up and off a lot, and they were pretty good for homing missiles when you needed attacking targets from far away. So mainly that was kind of his. I mean, he had a lot of options, of course, in that game, but those are the standouts, I would say, that were his largest, his most effective weapons. But this time there has been some changes, so there is actually quite a bit of changes, which I think are pretty exciting changes, very good changes, in my opinion. Let's get started in the first column here on the far left. This column is the mortars, the cannons, the grenades, Cannon Cs, like the cheap grenade bombing things. These are okay, but they're not the greatest. The reason is they call in very slowly. So if you have a chance to attack one large target that doesn't move, it would be good to take Cannon D or one of the cannons like Cannon C or something like that, because it does a lot of damage and it's very, very strong. But the negative is, of course, it costs a lot of points to call those in, like it did in the previous game. Also, I really like the grenade, the B grenades, like B10, B9, because they're very cheap, and they do a decent amount of damage. But like I said, the negative is they call in very slowly. So usually I'm not going to take stuff from this column very often at all. Column 2, however, is a huge change. Before you would but you wouldn't take this column too much in Earth Defense Force 4, because they all cost points. Before you had to kill a certain number of enemies before you can call them out again. This time around, they actually reload in the background, so they're very, very strong because of that. There's different options, but I would say the main go-tos, in my opinion, are the machine gun air raids, the ones where you place one beacon and it shoots a bunch of shots. Like this one shoots 150 shots of 327 damage, and it sticks to a target. And also the 105s. They also stick to a target. They do 24 shots of more damage, like 2,400 damage for this one. The reason I say these two are the best, in my opinion, is because Air Raider is all about multitasking. So you're always doing something in the background. And if you're using like a 150, where you have a bunch of shots, you have to shoot 10 shots to a target, or using a 120 or a rocket one, they're still decent, but the thing is you can't be doing something else in the background while you're using those. So I really like the 105 and the machine gun ones, so you can just set it, forget it, and then move on to something else while you're doing it. And while those are reloading in the background, then you can go back to doing something else and shooting these again, and it's just very effective. So those are my go-tos. Also, they do shoot through ships, so that's very important. They shoot through drop ships, so you can that's also very nice, whereas like the rocket one does not shoot through drop ships, for example, or the 120 I think doesn't shoot through ships as well, but I'm not 100% sure on that. So these, I usually will take one from this column. This is a very common, very popular column, very strong. The next column he has is strafe plans, bombing plans, and the new ones that are fire. They drop like napalm on the ground. It's actually a tough decision. Before, like I said, in EDF 4, it was always strafe plan, almost always strafe plan, because of just how cheap it was, and like I said, it pushed enemies away. The strafe plan no longer pushes enemies away this time in this game, so it's not as strong. It doesn't mean it's bad. It's still very good, but it's not as strong in the go-to. I actually find myself split about like 30% for each one. Like I'll split it up quite a bit. Like I'll take strafe plan sometimes if I want to take out like aerial targets, or just I need something cheap to throw and do a lot of damage in a lot of area. The bombing plans are very good this time around. They do a lot of damage, and like for example the best one, the Phobos, is amazing. It's so cheap. It does ridiculous damage, and it calls in relatively quickly, and it's just an amazing. Like, I'll use the other bombing plans too, not just this one. And also the fire plans. I really like the fire plans. If it depends on what you need. Like, if you need to help out your team by blocking a bunch of groups of enemies that are rushing at you, dropping fire plan right in front of where you're going to hold up is very, very useful. I found it very helpful, and I really like the fire plans now. They're very good, in my opinion. So I find it tough of what I'm going to take in this column. I usually won't take like the single line strafe plans, but even then, if you're fighting a bunch of wasps or tadpoles, it might be good for those. So it's a tough decision in this column. I really find taking all of them are pretty good. So can't really go too wrong. So usually I'll take something from this column and this column as well. And then the missiles. The missiles are pretty good this time. They reload in the background, so they're pretty strong for that reason. But I usually will take a Spritefall or a Satellite over the missiles just because of the ease of use for the Spritefall and Satellite compared to the missiles. But I still like the missiles, they're decent. Like, for example, the ATS, which is the Tempest in this game, it does over 400,000 damage, and it has a lot of points to call in, but it's a very strong weapon, and if you need burst damage at the beginning of a mission, this is very good. And then the fast missiles I like as well, just if you need some fast targets. But I usually don't take this column too often. Usually I'll take a Spritefall or Satellite over that. And speaking of which, this column is still very good. The Satellite Blaster is very strong this time because the Satellite Blaster reloads in the background, so that makes it pretty nice. As well as the Spritefall does not reload in the background, but it's very good burst damage, and it's a decently low price to call in for the points. So they're very strong options this time again as well. And I definitely find myself using them quite a bit. The single shot, the new thing that's like a single shot and you have to hit your target, like this one does 8,900 damage, and it's one shot, and it's very cheap, it's 81 points. So you have to kill the target to get it back. I usually don't use this too much, mainly because it reminds me of like the older gunship column in EDF 4, where if you miss your target, you're kind of in trouble. So I usually don't use my slot for that, but Satellite or Spritefall I usually do quite a bit. Now onto the Olympic gun column. The Olympic guns are pretty decent. They're pretty strong. They're pretty decent. But the only negative is they're outclassed. They're outclassed by the beacon gunships when you're above ground, and they're outclassed by the turrets when you're underground. I just feel like those two weapons are like the turrets and the beacon gunships are better than the Olympic guns in every way, for the most part. So I find myself very rarely taking the Olympic guns, unfortunately. I don't know how they could fix that, just because of how strong the other columns are, but it's just unfortunate, so I rarely take those. The turret guns are definitely back, and they are still very good. They're even better this time around because, for one, they reload in the background, so you don't have to always be worrying about switching to your turret guns while you're doing other things. You can multitask and wait for them to reload themselves, and then just put them out again, so very strong. And this time now there's fire guns. They're very good for crowd control, so I would say that the turret guns are very high in the meta as well this time around, and I'm very happy with them. These special weapons are more like a niche thing. They're more like fun, but they're not necessarily too useful, unfortunately. Of course, there's still the support column where you have, you know, defense, increase the defense of the party, increase power, give some healing, or beacon targets, or laser guide targets. So those are still useful, of course, in certain situations, but just depends on the situation, of course. And last of all, bunkers. Bunkers are still very good, still very strong. I used to really talk highly about the level 56 bunkers because of how fast they reloaded. I believe it was 10 seconds in the past game. They increased the reload time to 14.7 this time around, but they did increase the health of them, so they're not quite as good on Inferno because of just their health is not quite as good, but I still find myself using them on Inferno in certain situations because of that quick reload, which is very, very nice. But of course, you know, all your standard bunkers are back, which are very strong. But I would say overall, like 9 times out of 10 when I'm playing a mission, I'm going to probably take something from this column, something from this column. So the beacon gunships, the strafe plans or bombing plans, and then I'll probably usually almost always take something from the Satellite Blaster or Spritefall column. And then usually I'll switch that up with either turret guns if I need turret guns on a certain mission, or bunkers. But I'm almost always taking something from this beacon gunship column. It's so strong, and being able to reload it in the background, and it's just ridiculous damage. when you calculate some of the damages on these air raids. So air raid is really strong this time around. They really gave him a lot of damage on his air raids too. They really increased the numbers pretty high. Like the ATS I think is pretty ridiculous. I think on Inferno Online DLC 2 you can one-shot towers, and I think that's a little too strong in my opinion, but just because I like a challenge is the mainly reason I say that. But yeah, definitely they made Air Raider very strong this time, so Air Raiders can definitely be pretty excited to play this class in EDF 5. As far as the vehicles go, there's a lot of changes in that area as well. As far as, let me scroll down here on my notes here. Like before, like I was saying, like the railguns were very strong in the past, and he does have some railgun options, but they're different this time around. They're more like tanks. They drive like tanks. They're not slow, and they don't do quite as much damage as the Rangers railguns. But that's not the reason I don't think I take them. I think the main reason is the Vagultas. The Vagultas are just so strong this time around that it's hard not to take them almost 80% of the time, I would say. Maybe 70. I mean, it depends on the mission, of course, what you need, but they have so much health. I mean, the Inferno version, non-DLC, have this Vagulta has 104,000 health. This one has 99,000, 76,000, 75,000. Every difficulty, it feels like the health is very, very high for the Vagultas, and because the Vagultas have such a variety and diversity of weapons, it makes them very, very strong as far as what you need. Like, say you need long range, or say you need rockets, say you need fire, say you need like whatever, missiles. There's an option for the Vagulta that you can use, and they're just so strong this time. I think the reason is, like I said, mainly the health. So Vagultas, I think, are probably the best vehicles in this game, in my opinion. The tanks are still fine. I mean, they can still be good for, like, say you want to kite around the map and throw strafe planes and be mobile. You can still use that with tanks, but once again, Vagultas are better at it. Plus, they have better damage. They have more guns, more ammo. Like, there's just a lot of things that really are in favor of them. The Titans are better this time around, like I covered in a previous video, but still, it's very rare you'll take a Titan. It depends. Like if you need a Titan, chances are you're going to be staying in one spot and doing damage. And if that's the case, you can probably use a Proteus to be better off. But they're still fun. They're pretty fun. Naglings are not very good this time around because, for one, they have so little health. For example, the best one has 6,600 health, which was fine in EDF 4, but in EDF 5, the enemies hit harder, and it just seems like they die faster, and you don't get them as often as well as in the previous game, it feels like, at least to me. So just from not starting with a Nagling for one, and not being able to call as many out like in the past games, I just rarely find myself or seeing other people take the Nagling in this game, which is kind of unfortunate. The APCs are better this time around. They drive better, but once again, they're more of a niche thing. They're more of like a fun thing. They're very fast, so if you can get good at them, you can kite around with them. But once again, you only have one gun, and the Vagulta, you have mini guns, and you can still kite around. So once again, they're outclassed. So it's not necessarily that they're bad vehicles. It's just they're outclassed by the Vagultas, in my opinion. Of course, healing vehicles are still useful at certain times. Helicopters are very good in the right hands. If you can get good at them, of course they're amazing because of the fact that you can stay mobile, very mobile, and you can still throw air raids from your helicopter. As I covered in a video, if you're interested in that. As far as the helicopter's fuel, I was kind of concerned that would be an issue, but in all reality, from my experience using the helicopters, the fuel is not an issue with helicopters. It's not too bad. So the amount of time you're going to need the helicopter out for, you're going to probably have enough fuel, so it's not a big deal. So helicopter's still good. Like I said, I already covered the Vagultas. My favorite Vagultas, one of my favorites is the Easy, level 83. It has the new Stampede. I don't know if you want to call it that. Stampede, like it's like a shotgun rocket launcher, is the new weapon for a Vagulta, and it's one of my favorites. It's one of the highest close range damage you can get in a Vagulta. Very, very cool. But unfortunately, the secondary weapon is timed grenades. You shoot them on the ground, but yeah, it's still okay. And of course, the fire one is very, very fast with the shotgun and the 2 flame arms. Still have that one, and it's the fastest Vagulta besides the DLC, of course. And then the level 87 is just your good all-around, of course. Rocket, flamethrower, or rocket, machine gun, missile launcher, flamethrower, I think, one of each. Of course, lower levels, there also returns is, I think it's this one, level 63, where it has the 2 machine gun arms, and which are very, very strong. I forgot what the secondary guns are, but it reminds me of the, there's a level 60 Vegalta in EDF 4 that has, for its level, like hardest, when you play on hardest difficulty, they have very strong dual machine guns, and it has returned in this game as well, but it's only on hardest difficulty. Bargas, or Balams, whatever you want to call them, are back, and they're very strong. As long as you have a mission that doesn't have spiders and a lot of ants, your Barga is pretty good on that mission. So I still find myself using them just as much as EDF 4. And the Proteus, not as much, honestly. Not as much with the Proteus this time around because of the Vegaltas being so strong, because you can call out like multiple Vegaltas for the cost of a Proteus, and you could have 2 people using 2 Vegaltas instead of 1 Proteus, but they're still useful, I think, at a certain time and place. It just depends. And then last of all, depth crawlers. Depth crawlers are very good. They increase the health on them, which is something you'll notice right away, so they're actually usable because of the health, because before it was the health problem. It was always a health issue. So now you can actually use them above ground even, because of just how much health they have, which is pretty cool. And then of course the DLC one brings a very fast depth crawler, which is really cool. So that's exciting. But yeah, Air Raider has made a lot of changes overall, but I think they're pretty exciting, pretty fun changes. He feels like a different class, which, not completely different of course, but I mean, he feels like a more, I don't know, I would say more enjoyable class to me personally, just because of, I always like the multitasking of Air Raider, and because of being able to reload a lot of stuff in the background, you're always thinking about what you can do next, and it's pretty exciting. You're always switching weapons, throwing stuff down, laying out support, and it's just a lot more easy for someone that wants to support the group with Air Raider this time around, so pretty exciting. So I didn't really want to make too much videos like out actually in the field fighting with these weapons because there are so many things to cover, but those are just my thoughts of Air Raider in my opinion here, and go ahead if you want to leave in the comments your ideas as far as what you like about the new Raider class, like your favorite setups, but those are just my opinions of what I see, what I've seen online a lot. So so that'll cover it for Air Raider. So that's my meta opinions. So once again, thanks a lot for watching, and remember, EDF doesn't leave a man behind, ever. And if you'd like to support the channel, please consider liking and subscribing, as it does make a big difference to get the videos and the channel known by other people. Thanks.